Renowned Turkish peace activist Osman Kavala was detained Wednesday by counterterrorist police at Ataturk Airport in Istanbul. Kavala is the chairman of Anadolu Kltr Anatolian Culture, a non-profit that fights for artistic rights and cultural diversity. He was returning on a flight from Gaziantep in Turkey's Anatolia region, where he was discussing a project at the Goethe Institute, when he was arrested for unknown reasons. Osman Kavala has worked tirelessly to build reconciliation, dialogue and support the rule of law in Turkey. Release him from detention, pleaded Emma Sinclair Webb, Turkish director of the Human Rights Watch, in a tweet on Thursday. U.S. State Department spokeswoman Heather Nauert said in an interview with Reuters that his arrest was an example of a very alarming trend in Turkey. Since last year's failed military coup, more than 50,000 people, including academics, activists, civil society leaders, human rights defenders, and journalists have been arrested and tens of thousands have been removed from government jobs. More have expressed to the Turkish government our concerns on many occasions about this trend. It remains a major concern of ours, she told reporters in Washington, D.C. Kavala is also the founder of the International Peace and Reconciliation Initiative (IPRI), which launched in 2012 to facilitate a diplomatic resolution with the Kurdish in Turkey. France, like other European countries, regularly cooperates with Mr. Kavala, who is a regular interlocutor to our embassy. We will be very attentive to developments in this case, said Agnes Romatita Spain, French Foreign Ministry spokeswoman. Less Creative Times artistic director, Nato Thompson, will step down after a decade at the New York organization to join the recently established Philadelphia Contemporary as its first artistic director. We're incredibly proud of Nato and everything we accomplished together at Creative Time, acting executive director Alyssa Nichen said in a statement. This is an exciting and timely new venture, and we look forward to celebrating his work with Philadelphia Contemporary. Thompson began his career at Creative Time in 2007. During his tenure he worked on a variety of projects, including Pledges of Allegiance, 2017, a serialized commission of 16 flags responding to the current political climate, Pedro Reyes' Democracy, 2016, Kara Walker's A Subtlety, 2014, Trevor Paglin's The Last Pictures, 2012, and the annual Creative Time Summit. Philadelphia Contemporary was founded last year by Harry Philbrick, a former director of the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts. The nonprofit aims to build a non-collecting, multidisciplinary, and sustainable art venue dedicated to contemporary art. While the organization works on finding a permanent home, it will focus on staging site-specific projects around the city. Thompson will officially assume his new role in November. Dennis and Deborah Scholl, longtime collectors and supporters of the arts in Miami, have announced that they will donate 200 contemporary Aboriginal Australian works to the following museums: the Patricia and Philip Frost Art Museum at Florida International University, the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, and the Nevada Museum of Art in Reno. These three institutions are really engaged in this area and with us, Dennis Scholl told Jane Wooldridge of the Miami Herald. We want the work to be seen. The gift includes pieces by painters such as Warlampiringa J. Paltjari, Patty Bedford, Kulumbu Unipingu, and Nanjurnga Marawili. 90 works will be given to both the Frost and the Nevada Museum. The Met will receive 19 pieces. The Scholls have been collecting Aboriginal art more than 12 years ago when they began traveling frequently to Australia for their winemaking business. Dennis is currently the CEO of Art Center South Florida and Deborah is the board chair of the nonprofit exhibition space Locust Projects. In 2012, the couple donated 300 contemporary artworks to Miami's P-Res Museum. It takes a good decade to become really engaged with the genre, Dennis said. Then we think to find a good institutional home for the work. Henri Matisse. Photo HenriMatisse.net. The Versailles Court of Appeals has ruled that a Parisian dealer must return 2 cutouts by Henri Matisse, worth $4.5 million, to the artist's heirs. Vincent Noche of the Art newspaper reports. The family of Matisse's youngest son, the NY gallerist Pierre Matisse, filed a lawsuit against an unnamed party for fraud and the detention of stolen goods in January 2009, after learning that the artist's White Palm on Red and Green Snail on Blue were to be sold at an Impressionist and Modern sale at Sotheby's in New York. The works are among hundreds that were allegedly taken from storage at the art supply company Lefebvre Fauné sometime after they were deposited there in 1972. The auction house had attempted to uncover more detailed provenance information for both works. It consulted Matisse expert Wanda de Guy Bryant, who refused to authenticate the cutouts due to suspicions regarding Paris dealer J. Leblay's claim that they were acquired from a friend of Gisette Lefebvre, the heiress of the Lefebvre fortune, in the 1960s. According to Dougie Bryant, the pieces were most likely still at Pierre's nice apartment during this time, more after Georges Matisse, the artist's great-grandson, wrote a letter to Sotheby's informing it that the sellers were not the rightful owners of the works. The auction house pulled them from the sale. Rosevan, a Hong Kong-based company representing the seller, then sued Georges. However, the case was dismissed in 2010. The most recent judgment called Rosevan a cover mounted by Lablay in order to mask the origins of the pieces. Last New York State Supreme Court. After being charged on 15 counts of fraud last June, a former director at Sotheby's is now heading to jail, according to a report by Brian Boucher at ArtNet. Timothy Salmons, a solicitor who set up his own art dealing business in 1995 after serving as head of the auction house's Chinese art department, is a British citizen, but was arraigned in New York State Supreme Court last Friday, where prosecutors called for a sentence of 5 to 15 years in prison. Manhattan District Attorney Cyrus Vance said the following in a statement regarding the case. As alleged in the indictment, the defendant used his industry experience to gain the trust of prospective art sellers, then betrayed that trust by pocketing the proceeds of those sales to fund his own lavish lifestyle. Not only did victims lose millions of dollars, but many lost valuable pieces of artwork that had been in their families for generations. The charges have been up to multiple counts of grand larceny in the first and second degrees, as well as one count of scheming to defraud in the first degree, all related to Salmons selling works by Pablo Picasso, Marc Chagall, Paul Gauguin, Amadeo Modigliani, and Ren Magritte on behalf of several clients and pocketing the proceeds. Several of his clients began to file lawsuits in 2015, claiming he failed to remit payments. In response, a UK High Court froze all of his accounts, about $9 million in assets, confiscated his passport, and permitted him a $1,500 weekly allowance. The Manhattan DA maintains that between 2010 and 2015, Salmons, who had offices in New York and London, defrauded 5 victims in the US, the UK, and New Zealand. The accused also allegedly used proceeds from the sale of one victim's art to pay other clients and used art that did not belong to him as collateral to obtain personal loans. Glenn Hardy, Salmons' attorney, asked the judge on Friday to allow Salmons to post bail, claiming it would be very complicated to compile the records necessary to mount his defense if he were sent to jail. The attorney also argued that Salmons, whose passport has been seized and who voluntarily turned himself into U.S. Marshals, was not a flight risk, while pointing out that when his client was living in the UK after being released on bail there, Salmons had submitted willingly to restrictions on his travel imposed by the UK's insolvency service and that those conditions had gradually been eased due to his compliance. The U.S. judge declined to set bail though, and Salmons was taken into police custody after the arraignment. His next court date has been scheduled for November 6. Protesters demonstrating outside of the São Paulo Museum of Modern Art in Brazil. Hundreds of arts professionals have signed an open letter published Thursday, October 19, in protest of the wave of hate, intolerance, and violence against free expression in Brazil. In recent months, conservatives have been waging a war against cultural institutions by trying to censor and close down exhibitions, attacking museum staff members and visitors, and using social media to promote fake news and harass people who disagree with them. The letter condemns the actions of members of right-wing groups, religious sects, and several politicians and civil servants responsible for the onslaught. These arrogant fundamentalists refuse to give artistic works a more attentive reading, and go witch-hunting for signs of indecency, pornography and heresy, it reads. There is no questioning or intellectual debate, only violence and intolerance. The document, which as of today had more than 1,000 signatures, was written in response to a series of events that occurred over the course of this year. It specifically cites the Santander Cultural Center's decision to end its Queer Mushu exhibition early following allegations of pedophilia, the outcry over a nude performance that led to a petition calling for the Museum of Modern Art in São Paulo to close, and a rally against the works of Pedro Moralida at the Palace of Arts in Belo Horizonte. However, it also claims that artistic creativity has been threatened since 2010, when opposition against the newly elected President Dilma Rousseff, who was ousted in 2016, and Brazil's third edition of its National Plan for Human Rights, which includes extended protections for women and the LGBTQ community, began to build. According to the 342 Arts Movement, another group fighting to preserve Brazilians' right to freedom of expression, arts institutions are being targeted because they've been advocating for these groups. In conclusion, the letter urges people to mobilize in order to defend and deepen the rights to an environment of free circulation of ideas, and denounce those who work to destroy democracy in Brazil. The day the letter was published, it was read aloud to the National Congress by Workers' Party member Paulo Teixeira, as well as at the opening of the exhibition Histories of Sexuality at the Museu do Arte de São Paulo, which recently caved to pressure from conservatives and set an over 18 only age limit for admission to the show. It was also sent to several politicians and circulated through email on the messaging service called WhatsApp. Artist Renata Lucas told Osman Kavala of Artforum.com that these attacks must end and called the attempts to censor the arts as unacceptable and an imminent threat to democracy. Among the signatories of the letter are Clarissa Diniz, a curator at the Museu de Arte do Rio, Fernanda Brenner, curator and director of the non-profit PIV Lilian Tone, a curator at the Museum of Modern Art, New York Jorge Schwartz, professor and director of the Museu La Sarce Gall, and Marcos Gallon, artistic director of the Verbo Performance Art Festival, as well as countless artists, choreographers, professors, journalists, architects, and other cultural producers. The letter in full is as follows. More are artists, intellectuals and professionals from several areas, who have been speaking up in defense of democracy since 2015. Now we side with the recent initiatives against the wave of hate, intolerance and violence against free expression in the arts and in education. Hatred, intolerance and violence which have been pressed for a long time against women, LGBTQs, Afro-descendant, and indigenous people. We radically support freedom of speech and free flow of ideas, beliefs, information and artistic expressions. And we firmly believe in the free debate of each of these expressions. We believe, however, that it is necessary to identify the focus of these attacks on civil liberties. It became evident that right-wing militants, sects from within neo-Pentecostal churches, certain politicians with great public responsibility, but lacking Republican spirit, civil servants and bureaucrats in the judiciary sphere, the police force and public prosecutors are joining forces against artistic creations and art institutions. They are censoring exhibitions, harassing visitors and museum employees, and using social networks to demean and outrage people they disagree with. These arrogant fundamentalists refuse to give artistic works a more attentive reading, and go witch-hunting for signs of indecency, pornography and heresy. There is no questioning or intellectual debate, only violence and intolerance. That is how the reactionary and anti-democratic militias managed to abruptly shut down the exhibition Queer Museu at Santander Cultural Center in the city of Porto Alegre. In September, the police withdrew the painting Pedophilia, by Alessandra Cunha, from the Contemporary Art Museum in Campo Grande. Then a local court of law banned the theater play The Gospels According to Jesus, Queen of Heaven, by Joe Clifford, at Sesc Jundiaí. It is worth mentioning that the same militias have kick-started a campaign against the panorama of Brazilian art at the Museum of Modern Art in São Paulo due to the performance La Betrayed by Wagner Schwartz, an attack given irresponsible support by the mayor of São Paulo João Doria. Then, a horde of fanatics led by Congressman João Lead attempted to invade the Palace of Arts in Belo Horizonte aiming to destroy the works by Pedro Moraleda. We also believe that this is not about a specific assault to the artistic creativity but a phenomenon that emerged in 2010 as opposition to the National Plan for Human Rights PNDH3, a process that grew and was nurtured throughout the process of deposition of elected President Dilma Rousseff. Clearly, not every supporter of the presidential impeachment belonged to this anti-democratic lineage. But there were violent ultra-conservative activists and public agents harassing people of diverse thinking. The same people that were responsible for the several actions, such as the distribution of anti-Dilma sexist, misogynist and offensive car stickers, the verbal assault to left-wing politicians and activists on airplanes, in restaurants and even at more sensitive places like funerals and hospital wings, and the physical assaults to people wearing red clothes. Once the impeachment was completed, in better words, a parliamentary coup arranged through the buying of congressman votes led by Eduardo Cunha, a number of social achievements that have been obtained since the 1988 Constitution are being snatched away from the Brazilian people. That is how, day by day, they are restraining civil, social and individual rights in Brazil, suppressing workers' rights, threatening the freedom of education in schools, the environment protection, the same-sex union and much more. That is the body of work that results from this coup d'état. What we need now is to expand all democratic forces, beyond political partisanship, ideological and religious views, to face the concrete threats to freedom and social policies already in place, in the streets, in the legislative houses, in the courts of justice and in all the available means of communication. We propose the articulation of groups amongst friends, family and work colleagues for the organization of public acts and online action in the social networks aiming to defend and deepen the rights to an environment of free circulation of ideas, and denounce those who work to destroy democracy in Brazil. Thus Lawrence Argent, I see what you mean. 2005, sculptor and educator Lawrence Argent, best known for his 40-foot blue bear whose two front paws rest on the glass walls of the Colorado Convention Center in Denver as it peers inside, died on October 4 at the age of 60. Argent's other playful, site-specific works include a colossal panda, a giant rabbit, and a stainless steel Venus that is nearly as tall as the Statue of Liberty. Born in Essex, England, in 1957, and raised in Melbourne, Australia, Argent graduated from the Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology in 1983. In 1986, he graduated with a master's degree in fine arts from the Reinhardt School of Sculpture in Baltimore and continued to live in the United States. He eventually settled in Denver, Colorado, where he taught at the University of Denver for 24 years. To create his large-scale works, Argent often starts using a 3D printer to produce a model of the work. He then builds a steel skeleton and uses polymer concrete, fiberglass, and other materials to cover the metal frame. According to Harrison Smith at The Washington Post, Argent was at the forefront of digital sculpture and sat on the board of the Digital Stone Project, which supports artists who want to use new technology in their practices such as robotic stone cutting. He really understood how combining traditional and advanced technologies could help create art that was truly moving. Dan Jacob, the director of the Vicky Miron Gallery at the University of Denver, said in a statement. Lara Favoretto, Momentary Monument, The Stone, 2017. Artist Lara Favoretto used the sculpture she exhibited in this year's Sculptor Project AMNS to raise $31,400 for refugees and those facing deportation in Germany. Contributions were revealed when the work was smashed open after the show ended on October 1. Favoretto's Momentary Monument, The Stone, is part of a series that comments on the impermanence of monuments. A small slot on the side of the monolithic work allowed it to work as a kind of piggy bank. According to Art News, on Thursday, October 19, the money was donated to Hilf FR mentioned in Abschiebehilfe Rennie v., a German organization that helps displaced people. Favoretto has a second work in nearby Marl, Germany, the exhibition's satellite location. Due to organizational reasons, this stone will not be demolished until sometime next year. Firefighter Brandon Tulp working to prevent flames from crossing Highway 29 in California on October 12. Photo Marcus Yam for the Los Angeles Times. Northern California continues to battle wildfires, which have already blackened more than 240,000 acres, caused $1 billion in damages, and killed at least 40 people. Residents are trying to come to terms with the loss of life and property. Glass sculptor Clifford Rainey, the chair of the glass program at the California College of the Arts in Oakland, lost the Mount George home and studio he shared with his partner, floral designer Rachel Razor, in a Napa Valley fire. He told Charles Desmarais of the San Francisco Chronicle that he had about 34 large-scale works he was currently working on as well as around 30 other glassworks on the premises. Every single piece of artwork I own, I've had since college, was lost, he said. Photographer Norma I. Quintana, who was preparing to head to Puerto Rico to photograph the aftermath of Hurricane Maria, was at her Napa Valley home with her family when she was alerted to an approaching fire by a friend. Shortly after, police arrived to evacuate them. When she returned to the house, everything was gone. I just thought we would be back and never ever thought it would burn, she told the San Francisco Chronicle. We had this house almost 30 years. Among the possessions destroyed by the fire were Quintana's collection of photographs, including works by Mary Ellen Mark, Sally Mann, and Graciela Iturbide. Maury journalist Sam Whiting of the San Francisco Chronicle went with Iranian-born artist Bobak Ahmad as he returned to his Santa Rosa home and studio. They discovered that Ahmad's art-filled home, filled with works by Pablo Picasso, H.E.N. Armiro, and Salvador Dali, as well as his own hot air paintings and aluminum mobiles, were obliterated by the blaze. I have been paralyzed the last week, he said. I can't even figure out what to eat, he told Whiting. The worst loss is the 30 years of my sketchbooks. That's everything I have. While the Santa Rosa Charles M. Schulz Museum and Research Center, dedicated to the life and work of the creator of the beloved Peanuts comic strip, was spared, the home of Schultz's widow, Jean, burned to the ground. The Schultzes lived in the house since the 1970s, and it's where the illustrator passed away in 2000. Their son, Craig, also lost his home, reported Keith Allen and Madison Park for CNN. The nearby museum and research center is currently closed due to power outages. I am devastated by the loss of the home I shared with Sparky for 25 years, Jean told The Washington Post, the memories of which filled me with happiness every day. The De Rosa Center for Contemporary Art reported that the fires reached its grounds, but winds diverted the flames before they reached its main campus. The institution's staff and galleries remain safe. The museum will stay closed through October 22, and it has postponed the November 4 opening of its exhibition Be Not Still Living in Uncertain Times. Our hearts go out to all those affected by the fires and to the many individuals who are stepping up in this time of need. This is, and will continue to be, a deep wound for us all, Executive Director Robert Saint said in a statement. As De Rosa continues its commitment to being a resource for our community, we hope, in the weeks ahead, to provide a space for all to gather, rebuild, and heal from these dark days together. According to the Los Angeles Times, as of Friday, October 20, the California Fire Department has managed to contain the majority of the 7 fires still burning across the state's northern counties. A long-awaited rainfall, which deposited an inch of rain on Thursday, has helped the firemen combat the flames.